So what is Dreambox Learning Math? So essentially, it is a digital-based adaptive mathematics program for K through 8 students. And what it is for students is it's going to be adaptive in nature, which we'll discuss. It is going to be rigorous. It's going to challenge students. And it's also going to be motivating for those students. So we built all three of those elements in to make sure that the students have a challenging yet fun experience. So the first element that I want to discuss is the adaptive nature of Dreambox. So I'm sure you've seen these types of students. When given that question, what is 29 plus 72? We can get four predictable errors. That first student answers 91, 911, 111, and then 2,972. And as you can see, the errors are pretty predictable. The first one, the student doesn't regroup. That second student adds each value independently. The third student is going to carry but double count. And that last student just mashes those numbers together, combines all the digits, and clearly doesn't have a good grasp on that standard addition algorithm. And so what's going to happen with Dreambox and the adaptive engine is that it not only is looking, and it really doesn't even focus on right or wrong. Given certain lessons, given all lessons, there are about 600 different data points that are taken in consideration. And one of those data points is an error analysis. And so you can see that student 2,972 made a very egregious error, clearly needs some remediation in their instruction. The adaptive engine is going to recognize that error and adapt that student backwards to where she needs to be in order to gain that basic understanding of that addition algorithm. Or that student that answered 111, even though the student got that wrong, Dreambox simply is going to ask another question to find out, was this a simple oversight or was this a systematic error, and then adapt that student accordingly based on where they need to be. So that intelligent adaptive engine takes over immediately upon starting on Dreambox, adjusting those kids, doing continual formative assessments within each of those lessons, identifying where their successes are and identifying where remediation needs to occur in order to find that zone of proximal development for each individual student, truly differentiating the instruction within the program. Secondly, this is our philosophy behind our rigor at Dreambox. And so primarily, we want to develop more than just math students. We want to create mathematicians. And really, we're going to do that with these three key points. The first is we want to develop that mathematical growth mindset. So do students persist through challenging problems? So by nature, the students are going to be challenged within Dreambox. They are going to get questions wrong. And a lot of times, I think students really get hung up on, I'm either right or I'm wrong, I know it or I don't know it. And a lot of times I found they have made that decision by about the third grade. They have decided for themselves that they are either math students or not math students. And so we want to go above and beyond that. And rather than focusing on right or wrong with the students, we want to focus in on their process, as well as their growth, and really encourage students to stick with it, developing that sense of persistence, developing that attitude of perseverance in order to create that growth mindset within the student. Secondly, we really want to develop problem-solving skills. So do students think creatively about how to arrive at a solution? So the fascinating thing about Dreambox is that each of the lessons contain a digital manipulative that the students can use the way that they want to. It's more of an exploratory process. It's discovery based within the math. This is definitely not a drill and kill program. The kids really get to sink their hands into the math and really become a part of it. And they get to be creative about their solutions because of those digital manipulatives. It is not uncommon to have, two students at the same table, maybe working on similar lessons, working on that same manipulative, and one student will use it in their way and bring them to the correct solution, where another student sitting next to them on that same digital manipulative may use it a very different way, but still arrive at that same correct solution. And lastly, we want to develop critical thinking skills within the students. So do students have an opportunity to practice the unknown? So a common perception about Dreambox is that it's only used for struggling learners and remediation. It does hit those kids very well, but it's also going to hit your grade level students, but it's also going to work for your advanced students as well because of that adaptive engine. And as students progress through the lessons and progress through the content, they will eventually have an opportunity to practice that unknown. And they may be exposed to lessons and content and topic that they have yet to be introduced to in the classroom. So they're going to be able to, again, like I said, truly differentiate between those three different types of learners. And then thirdly, the environment and the program is going to be motivating and fun for the students. It does look game-based, but it is far from a game. The digital manipulatives are fun to use. The students are engaged in them. They think they're playing a game because they earn coins and badges and different rewards based on their successes. But it is far from a game, and we're actually just kind of tricking the kids into learning math. Because of those motivating factors. Next thing I want to touch upon is recommended Dreambox usage. And it's a little bit different depending upon whether you're a K through 2 teacher or a 3 and up. The approximate length of a lesson is about 5 to 10 minutes. You can monitor that within your teacher dashboard. There's going to be another session that's going to dig in a little bit deeper and how to find and access different data points so you can keep track of your students' progress. But 5 to 10 minutes is about that sweet spot. You may find, however, that a student could take maybe 1 or 2 minutes on a lesson because they know exactly what's going on. And on the flip side, you could find that a student who is having more difficulty with that lesson may take them a little bit longer. For the 3 and up students, because the lessons are a little bit more difficult conceptually, 8 to 12 minutes is that sweet spot per lesson. And then lessons per week. We'd like to see those K through 2 students complete about 5 to 10 lessons per week, and the 3 and up students completing about 7 to 8 lessons per week. And this is a great point for goal setting with your students. At the beginning of the year, when you're setting up your stations and you're setting up expectations, getting the kids excited and fired up about Dreambox, this is a great place, a great starting point to set goals for your individual students as well as an entire class. And then our recommended time on Dreambox for the younger kids, 30 to 60 minutes per week and 60 to 90 minutes per week. So best case scenario, you have 3 days of Dreambox in a week and you're hitting 20-minute sessions apiece. That's going to give you the opportunity to hit those marks as well as hit those lesson completion marks as well. So student expectations. Again, when you're rolling out Dreambox in your class, these are great points to stress with your students. First and foremost is to try every problem. persist even though it is hard. And along with that is to finish every lesson. And so one thing that students can do is back out of a lesson prior to completion. And that could be for a very different reason. It could be they simply just ran out of time in class and had to back out of a lesson. But a lot of times it's because they saw a manipulative that they weren't familiar with, or a mathematical concept that they weren't familiar with, or maybe they just weren't feeling decimals that day and they back out of a lesson. But we really want to encourage, regardless of how challenged that they feel, to finish every one of those lessons. And there's two reasons for that. The first is to be able to utilize those in-lesson supports. So within each of the lessons, if a student goes in and struggles with that first question, Stella, the main narrator and character, will provide some gentle guidance and support within that lesson, starting at a very basic level. And then if the student begins to continue to struggle, that guidance and those suggestions start to get a little bit more in detail, to the point where Stella will actually say, here, let me show you one way to solve this problem. And so if a student goes into a lesson, gets something wrong, and then decides that they want to quit, they are missing out on that built-in support within each of those lessons. The other reason we want to make sure that the students are completing those lessons is that, like I said earlier, there's about 600 different data points within each lesson that we're taking into consideration. The longer that the students spend on that lesson, the more that they complete those lessons allows us to accumulate the data that we need in order to maneuver that student forward, backward, at grade level as necessary, making sure that they are getting the correct content. The next one is using the digital manipulative only. We don't want the students relying upon paper, pencil, or calculators. And really, the reason behind that is it's the equivalent of showing your work. So if the students are working on their lessons and they're completing everything on pencil and paper, typing numbers into a calculator, and then just putting their answers into the program, Dreambox has no way of determining the steps that they took, the process that they took, has no way of doing an error analysis on what that student does or how they arrived at their solution. And so we really want to make sure that they're specifically and only using that digital manipulative so we can gather the best data that we can. Lastly, we want the students to, or additionally, we want the students to work independently. So we want to know what the students know. We don't want to know what their table mate knows if they're working on the same lesson. And we really want to encourage parents and guardians at home, if the students are working there. They do have access 24/7, but we really want to know what the student knows. And sometimes, you might find you have a well-meaning parent or guardian that is assisting with their students, and they're advancing at a quick rate. Then they come back to school to work, and what they're doing by themselves isn't really matching their level of advancement within the program. And then finally, we want to use headphones. There is, that way they get those built-in supports, they get those auditory directions, and it is also available in both English and Spanish. So if you have primary Spanish speakers, all those auditory directions, any written directions will be in Spanish. So we're truly assessing their mathematics ability rather than their language ability.